guys, it's Eddie and today I am back with another movie review for you all. Now, today's movie has been requested of me and I'd never heard of this film before. It's called The Spirit of the Beehive and it's a Spanish film from the 70s and it's directed by Victor Erice or Erice. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Please ignore my terrible pronunciation of these names. I am so sorry in advance. But basically this film is about the life of a little girl called Anna who is living in an isolated rural village in Spain in around 1940, so under the Franco regime. And basically she goes to watch a film called Frankenstein that we all know and love, and she watches it, she becomes enthralled, she becomes enchanted, and the movie is sort of her developing fascination with this film, and you know, it kind of delves into the lives of her and her family, and it ends up, you know, becoming quite dramatic in seeing how her fascinations result. Now, I won't give anything away because this film is kind of slow paced. It's sort of, you have to work out what's going on scene by scene. You have to work out how the characters are connected because initially they're all shown in different sort of scenarios. But when they come together and you start to see how they're connected, the film becomes incredibly interesting and enthralling. And so that's why I think it is kind of slow, but it's worthwhile persevering with it. That's what I found. Now, of course, I'd like to mention the historical context surrounding this film because I did some research on it and it's incredibly interesting. So, the isolation and the emotional breakdown in the film that we see occur is sort of a symbol of Spain in the Franco government in the 1940s to the 1970s, and it explains the subtlety of the film's message. So, all of these things happening with the characters, the main character Anna and her family, all of their experiences are really sort of show the experiences of people in Spain, or they attempt to at this time. So that sort of criticism of the Franco regime is hidden in the innocence of this child and the exquisite cinematography that is seen. Because the regime ended 2 years after the film was released. So, you know, you couldn't be too critical of the regime at this time, but the film manages to do it by sort of embedding it in the life of this little girl and sort of being quite cautious and quite subtle, and you having to read between the lines to understand the filmmaker's message. I think that's incredibly interesting, and I really did understand after I watched the film. You know, you could really, I think, see what the filmmaker was trying to get across with his interpretation, obviously his experiences of the Franco regime in Spain. So it's, you know, it's incredibly interesting, and I thought that I would like to just impart that knowledge for anyone who's interested and just might like to know a little bit of background about the film. But with that, let's go on to the analysis of the film itself. So I thought that the cinematography was stunning. It encapsulated that isolated feel, so it pushed the young Anna to allow her imagination to run wild, because they were in this sort of very isolated village, rural village in Spain. You know, there were a lot of shots of sort of vast fields and countrysides, so you could see how this little girl would let her imagination sort of run wild and become sort of fascinated with something like Frankenstein in such a sort of uneventful place that, you know, as the village in which she was residing with her family. So the characters themselves seem to move within a wide shot frame. A lot of these sort of building shots were used where there would sort of be a long shot and there would be the characters would sort of move either towards the camera or away from it, and the sort of focus of the lens was just totally enthralling, because these sort of slow shots displaying the, you know, the movements of these characters really showed, you know, just how alone they were in this sort of area of Spain and this sort of really isolated element of their lives, and I thought it captured it perfectly. It made so much sense, and I just think that the direction was absolutely beautiful. So I think it's honestly some of the best cinematography I've ever seen, and I didn't expect it because, as I said, I've never heard of this movie before. It was suggested to me, so I was really, quite shocked at how beautiful it was. But I can promise you, it's a really gorgeous film. Um, but not only is it gorgeous in its visual sort of display, it's also got an amazing score. It's equal parts bright, and it's also quite haunting. So it captures the innocence and naivety of Anna, the main character, to whom we are really drawn by her sort of captivating fascination with, the products of her imagination. And I just think that Anna Torrent, who played Anna, even as such a young child, she really managed to capture this wide-eyed innocence. Obviously, she was a child, but this sort of the nuances of a child's sort of imagination, she really managed to capture. And I think that her performance was just lovely for someone of such a young age at the time. She did incredibly well, and she was supported obviously by the rest of the cast, her family, who were just amazing. And what was so great about this film is that there was so little dialogue, which is unusual. It was quite sparse. The only real dialogue was sort of the scenes between Anna and her sister Isabel, and I think that worked because you could see in the subtlety of the acting the way that these characters were just able to let their imaginations run away with them, and that's explained perfectly by the visual shots of such an isolated place in which they're living. The scenery allowed you to understand how these characters sort of were moving within their lives without sort of interacting with each other. And that's another thing, the emotional detachment of the family manifests in different ways, and we see it. The sister, Isabel, is, quite pranking and deceitful towards her sister. She sort of pushes her into creating this sort of imaginary friend in Frankenstein. Her father, with his, beehive and keeping of the bees, and her mother with her love letters, her very wistful love letters to sort of a lover that she sort of dreamt up, who is away in the war. So you can see that these characters, more than anything, are just, aren't able to really confide with each other, and they end up having these little manifestations of their own boredom, I guess, and isolation under what was the Franco regime. So I think it's just an incredibly enthralling film. It's so interesting to see these characters with such little dialogue between them. In fact, the only scene in which the entire family is together has no dialogue whatsoever. It's done between shots and, carefully placed looks. And I think that just shows the absolutely brilliant, clever and genius nuances of this film. I was completely shocked and surprised by it. And I've never heard of it. So I would, advise anyone who hasn't seen this film to give it a try, because although I said it is a little bit slow to get started, it's just fantastic, and it does surprise you with how much you're invested in the characters and how much you want to see the way in which Anna's sort of, fascination with something that she's seen on screen manifest in her life. And yeah, I would highly recommend this film. It's stunning visual work. It's got, sparse dialogue, which allows the visuals to really speak for itself, as well as the acting. It's poignant, it's subtle, and it's really, really beautiful. And yeah, I was really, really happy with this film. I think I can't thank you enough for requesting it, because I was really shocked by it, and I love finding films that shock and surprise me, and I have to say that this one really did. So for anyone that hasn't heard of it, do a little research about it and give it a try. I think that's what's great about these kind of films that aren't really Western films that aren't American or British mainstream, films like Pan's Labyrinth, Cinema Paradiso, The Spirit of the Beehive now, all the films that are sort of international films that I've seen are able to move me in a way that I might not really get with, you know, sort of the bog standard American or English films that you see sort of churned out nowadays. I think this is a really special piece of celluloid. It's a really special piece of work, and I really I'm very happy that I saw it. So yeah, I would very highly recommend it. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it 5 out of 5 stars, because even though it's unusual and even though it takes some time to get going, if you persevere with it, it's just one of the films that will kind of stick with you forever. If the visuals aren't enough for you, it's definitely the story of this girl and the incredibly interesting historical context behind it. So yeah, 5 stars for me, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. I am always open to requests. You can request a movie for me to review by commenting below or messaging me on my Tumblr. The link is always in the description. But that is it for now. Hope you've enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!